But for those of you who don't know, um, we have a new segment on the show called Hot Take of the Week, right? The absolute hottest, just volcanic levels of heat, just absolutely sensational, like the center of the sun. And who better to start off this segment than Darren Grimes himself? He's a political commentator, Darren, for those of you that don't know, from the northeast of England, like myself. But he's from, I believe, Newcastle, which is a shame. He's well known for his, hypocrisy, double standards, and platforming people with questionable views. If we can get
slavery was not genocide. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many damn blacks in Africa or in Britain, would there? An awful lot of them survived.
That's a clip from an interview that Darren did with David Starkey, the historian, and I use that word advisedly, who was saying there about how slavery couldn't be genocide because there are so many black people still around. He said damn blacks, which Darren seemed to find okay as he sort of nodded along continuously like a woodpecker in slow motion as David Starkey went on this slightly racist rant. But Darren isn't just known for that. He's a real fighter. And who does he fight? He fights the woke left, the liberals and the leftists and the socialists and the Marxists and the communists, but also people who are fascists. Because the left is fascist, but they're also socialist and communist, but they're also liberal, and they love globalization, but also they need to like globalization because they don't, but they do, but they don't, and they love the EU and hate Britain. But when they want to help poor people in Britain, that's bad. Anyway, so he's an interesting guy. And his hot take of the week was amazing. When I saw it, I just thought we had to talk about it because it is profoundly stupid, which is pretty much everything that he says. But it's also something that I think will get through to a lot of people because it seems like it makes sense, like on the surface. So let's have a look at what sort of tantalizing treasure Darren spewed out onto the internet from his magnificent brain. So this is what he said. He said, if renewable energy is so cheap, how come those with energy suppliers that purport to offer 100% renewable energy are raising their prices in line with those who use gas? Okay. Now, I mean, look, it's a good question. And if someone was asking that in good faith, I'd genuinely be like, yeah, yeah, it is a good question. But he's not asking it in good faith, is he? Because he knows the answer to the question. Or maybe he doesn't. I really don't know. But look, first off, we should obviously have a public ownership of energy. That's abundantly clear from this whole situation. Because if we have public ownership of energy, then we could have far greater democratic influence and control over how these services are operated, right? And people's bills wouldn't need to go up because we'd be able to, like ordinary people's bills wouldn't be able to go up because we'd be able to add it to the deficit. And the deficit isn't always a bad thing, by the way. The big magic scary government number isn't always bad. I recommend, if any of you think that deficit is just automatically bad, read The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. It's a very good book. But anyway, the point that I'm making is we should obviously have public control over energy. It's an essential service. It should not be ran in order to make a profit for a handful of wealthy shareholders and executives. It should be ran to help ordinary people, right? And to provide them with a service that they genuinely really need. So that would probably stop this whole issue anyway, because the state would be able to step in and say, no, we're capping these prices here, and it'd be easier to do that with it under public ownership, because of course the prices wouldn't be direct payments to a private company; they would be taxes. Right? But that aside, why is this actually happening? So first off, there's an analysis from the World Economic Forum that shows us very clearly that renewable energy, for the most part, is significantly cheaper than any other forms, right? They may be more expensive to initially set up, right? And I believe that's especially the case with things like nuclear power. But after a while, it's way cheaper, right? It's cheaper to have those, to maintain those and to like kind of keep them running than it is with the coal plants or, you know, oil or gas or whatever it is. Fracking, Darren. So that's just a fact. But what's also important to recognize is Darren isn't strictly wrong that those prices are also going up for people who are basically on almost 100% or 100% renewable energy. But there's a really great article by a guy called Michael Grubb, who's a professor of energy and climate change at UCL, and he gave this explanation, and I think it's a good one. So he said, energy markets aren't designed to cope efficiently with sources like renewables, which cost a lot to build, but far less than fossil fuels to run. He said, governments offer long-term fixed price contracts to generators for their output of renewable energy. This has been the biggest driver of investment, while competitive auctions of these contracts to companies keen to build renewables have slashed building costs the most. In contrast, excuse me, households and other small consumers can rarely buy fixed price contracts more than a year or two ahead. Given the uncertainties in wholesale prices, along with governments encouraging competitive switching between suppliers. So the electricity generated from renewables contracts is fed into the rest of the system, which balances the variable output from renewables by generating more or less from conventional sources. So essentially, because we still have a significant reliance on fossil fuels, in this case, you know, more specifically gas, they have a significant level of leverage in the market. They can essentially dictate the way that the prices go, because we have a far too sort of centralized corporate system where when it comes to energy costs and energy distribution. If we made it, and the what's his face, Professor Grubb, I forgot his name for a second, but Professor Grubb says in the article as well that he's proposed a way, he and a bunch of colleagues have proposed a way that you can enhance the autonomy of ordinary consumers, trying to get the right costs for them, and more people would switch to more renewables, which would obviously encourage private investment and public investment into renewable energy more and more. So there's clearly ways to solve that. So that's why, to answer Darren's question, because I know he was sincerely asking it, and he needed to know, and I encourage him to read the whole article and do lots of research, as I'm sure he already tried to do. He's probably just busy being crafty, as he always is, and you know, I can't blame him for that. So I'd like to thank Darren for giving us this wonderful hot take of the week.